Spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
On leaving the synagogue, Jesus entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Simon's mother-in-law lay sick with a fever. They immediately told him about her. He approached, grasped her hand, and helped her up. Then the fever left her, and she waited on them. When it was evening, after sunset, they brought to him all who were ill or possessed by demons. The whole town was gathered at the door. He cured many who were sick with various diseases, and he drove out many demons, not permitting them to speak because they knew him. Rising very early before dawn, he left and went off to a deserted place where he prayed. Simon and those who were with him pursued him, and on finding him said, "Everyone is looking for you." He told them, "Let us go on to the nearby villages, that I may preach there also. For this purpose have I come." So he went into their synagogues, preaching and driving out demons throughout the whole of Galilee. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Panic quickly began to spread a couple weeks ago as the news of a frightening accident went all out in the news. There was a man who was going about his usual work when he suffered a terrible injury. Blood was spurting everywhere. His co-workers had to come and apply pressure. He was rushed to the hospital where he required 10 stitches. I'm sure that accidents like this occur all the time, but what made this news so significant was that the man's name was Tom Brady. And the body part that he injured was his right hand, perhaps the most important and valuable body part in the whole world. What was going to happen? All of New England collectively held its breath to see if the hand would function properly as the Patriots faced the Jaguars with another trip to the Super Bowl on the line. Our bodies and their various parts and organs are surprisingly fragile. All it takes is an accident or an injury or a natural disaster or a virus, and our career could be ended. Our life could be changed. Just ask Job. Job, as a young man, had everything going for him. He was healthy, he was wealthy, he had a big home, he had a nice family, he had a successful career. He was going from victory to victory. But then one day it all changed. In a single day, all of these messengers come to Job with terrible news. "Job, robbers have come down from the hills and have killed all your workers and taken all your animals. Job, lightning has struck in your field. Your crops are on fire. They're being destroyed. Job, your house was blown down in a desert wind. Your wife and your children were inside. They were killed. Job, you've been diagnosed with severe boils. They're going to cover your skin from head to foot." In a single day, Job loses everything. And we hear the lament of this poor man in the reading today. He's crying out to God, "My life on earth is a drudgery. I have forgotten what happiness is." Our career, our health, our home, our family, these are all things we can take for granted until something happens. Sometimes when we're young, especially if we haven't experienced any real suffering or tragedy yet in our life, we can feel invincible. Like nothing could ever go wrong. We take unnecessary risks. It was about this time last year that I was invited by some of the youth in our parish to go sledding. They had built this sledding trail down a steep hill in their backyard, and they had constructed a jump that went over their driveway into a snowbank. And this looked like a lot of fun. I had done lots of things like this as a kid. It didn't matter that I was getting close to 40 now, and that the trail went by a busy road with traffic, and I didn't have any gloves in my hand that day. It didn't matter. I was invincible. And I got on this sled at the top of the hill and went down face first down this slope. I went over the jump with great grace. I landed with incredible ease. Everything was great. But then I realized I was kind of headed towards the traffic, so I wanted to be careful. So I reached out to either end of the sled, and I grabbed a hold of the snow and ice, and I tipped myself over and fell into the snowbank. But then I cried out in pain. because the sharp ice that day had cut into my gloveless hands, and now I was bleeding all over the place, all over the snow. They were bruised and so sore. Oh, they hurt so much. I had to run into the house and get them all bandaged up. I was bleeding all over the people's front door. It was terrible. I think I suffered more than Job did that day. At least now as I look back at it, though, I have something in common with Tom Brady. So, but there I was in such pain, crying out to God to help me. Even Tom Brady, who famously never takes risks with his body, who drinks 30 glasses of water a day and goes to bed at 8 o'clock every night and never eats unhealthy food except for the occasional avocado ice cream, even he is beginning to face his own mortality as he's now over 40. Yes, he's playing better than any other quarterback late into his career in NFL history, but someday, we think, maybe it'll be 10 years from now, he's eventually going to get to the point where he's not going to be able to play like he used to as a young man. As Peter's mother-in-law was lying sick with a fever, she was probably facing her own mortality as well. She once had everything going for her, too. She was the matriarch of her family. She had a nice home. She had a family. She had the prestige of the community. But she lost everything, too. We know that because we hear that the mother-in-law is living with her daughter and her son-in-law, which in that particular culture would have meant that she had probably lost everything, because that would have been a last option. She's probably lost her husband at this point. She probably has no other relatives to go back to. She's lost her home and her independence. And now she's lost her health. She's lying sick with a fever, maybe dying. In the midst of all that, Jesus comes. Jesus comes into the town of Capernaum, walks into Peter's home, and sees the mother-in-law lying there in the corner in bed. And Jesus wants us to be healed. And he walks over and takes the woman by the hand and raises her up. It reminds me of a football player going down and grabbing a hold of a teammate's hand and helping him up off the field after being knocked down. Jesus is on our team. He's supporting us. He wants us to go on to victory, and so he helps us out. And that hand of Jesus is the most powerful hand in the world, even more powerful than the right hand of Tom Brady. And with a powerful hand and outstretched arm, Jesus raises the woman to life. Jesus wants us to be healed. Not just of the physical illnesses and accidents that we experience in life, though even today, through the power of prayer, Jesus still performs miracles. But more importantly, Jesus came to heal us from the spiritual illnesses that afflict us all. From the illnesses of pride and envy and greed and unforgiveness and anger and lust, all these things that can kill us not only in our bodies, but can kill our souls. Can kill that most important part of us inside. And Jesus came not just to heal the sick, but to cast out demons, to forgive sinners, to restore us to friendship with God. God certainly never causes the illnesses and the accidents in our life. God doesn't want that for us. He created a world in which there was no illness or accident. We caused those things because of our sin. I caused my stupid sledding injury because I was stupid. But God does allow sometimes the consequences of our actions to take place. God does allow sometimes illnesses or accidents to happen, because sometimes he knows that physical illness and suffering can actually be the best medicine to heal the spiritual wound within us. Sometimes it's a physical illness or accident that causes us to humble our pride, to realize our dependence on God, to realize that maybe we're heading head-on towards destruction and we need to stop. I certainly learned my lesson. I am never sledding again. Sometimes physical illness or suffering can be what makes us most compassionate in our lives. Look at Peter's mother-in-law. When she's healed, she gets up and she immediately goes and serves everyone else. Her experience of suffering has set a fire within her now to relieve the sufferings of others. Sometimes physical suffering and illness can be the very thing that most strengthens our faith. Look at Job. After he goes through all of these difficulties, he says, "Naked I came into this world, naked I will leave it. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Tom Brady's injury, as scary as it was at the time, only made us admire him more because he overcame that great injury. He led this team to the Super Bowl with 10 stitches in his hand. He overcame the loss of his best receiver from a concussion. He overcame a 10-point deficit in the fourth quarter. And because of all of that, the legend of Tom Brady only grew. There is no illness or setback or suffering that we experience in this life that will ever lead to final defeat if we bear it with patience and faith. We are too valuable in God's hands for him to ever let go of us. We are more precious in his hands than any Super Bowl trophy. Someone once wrote a reflection called "In Whose Hands?" A football in my hands is worth about $20. A football in Tom Brady's hands is worth about $20 million a year. It depends on whose hands it's in. A basketball in my hands is worth about $10. A basketball in LeBron James's hands is worth $100 million. It depends on whose hands it's in. A golf club in my hands is pretty useless. A golf club in Tiger Woods' hands is pretty priceless. It depends on whose hands it's in. A rod in my hands might keep away a wild animal, but a rod in Moses' hands could part the mighty sea. A slingshot in my hands is a children's toy. A slingshot in David's hands is a mighty weapon. A fish and a loaf of bread in my hands is a couple of fish sandwiches. A loaf of bread and a fish in God's hands can feed thousands. Nails in my hands might produce a birdhouse. Nails in Jesus' hands can produce salvation for the whole world. It depends on whose hands it's in. As you can see, it depends on whose hands it's in. So we can put our concerns, our worries, our fears, our hopes, our dreams, our families, and our illnesses in God's hands. Because it depends on whose hands they're in.
Mm-hmm.